Everybody, and welcome to the December Parentis Literary Salon. We are super excited. We're going to have 3 superstar authors on in just a little bit, and one of them is coming back. We've had her before. So while everybody is gathering and logging in and all this stuff, I need to tell everyone that this Parentis Literary Salon is made possible in part with public funds from Creative Engagement, supported by the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council and administered by LMCC. This event was also funded in part by poets and writers through public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, and from generous donations from audience members like Susan, David, Zafra, Peggy, Linda, Barbara, Holly, Lori, Julie, and of course, all of our fabulous sustaining title members. Thank you to everyone who supports Parentis and its mission to help writers stay on creative track after they start a family. Throughout tonight's event, you can always chat us. We are happy to answer your questions. And if you happen to be watching on Facebook, please make liberal use of that like button. Ask questions, send in your comments, and do shout outs if there are parts of the readings that you really love. So I wanted to also introduce Christina Chu, who is our fabulous and magnificent Parentis curator. We already have 15 people watching us at least. I'm watching the numbers go up. It's very exciting. And as a reminder, you can always comment. We can see you, we can hear you. In fact, right now, if you're watching, write in the comments hello and where you're watching from so that we would know. And I don't know where that accent came from. I'm like part Canadian. Anyway, I don't know. Today's a funny night. I think I'm on like a holiday festive thing. I'm used to having like raffles and music and all kinds of things during our December salon, but instead we just have superstars, which Christina is going to introduce for us one at a time. We'll say hi to them all, and then we'll start in our readings. Go, Christina.
So first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. The Parentis crowd is like, you guys are awesome. We love you. And we put together this December holiday salon hoping that we would be out of COVID and we would have a spectacular party for you guys. And I'm sorry, we're still in COVID. And so we're doing this from home, but we do have the most incredible authors tonight. So you're really, really going to have a great time. Our first author to read tonight will be Dann. She has published 4 acclaimed novels and many, many pieces of nonfiction and fiction. And I think you can always see her in the Boston Globe. She always seems to have an essay in the Boston Globe. They're so lucky. She's probably best known for her novel Mermaids. I don't know if you've seen it. If you haven't seen it, you need to get right out there and onto Netflix and watch Mermaids.
It's got Cher.
Yeah, it's got Cher, Winona Ryder, and Christina Ricci. So it was incredible. And in fact, I sought her for teaching, her classroom experience, because she's also an incredible teacher. So her nonfiction book, Butterfly Hours, was chosen as one of the best books for writers by Poets and Writers magazine. See, I wasn't kidding. Dann also wrote The Goldfish Went on Vacation, a memoir of loss, which received a Forward Indie Gold Award for family and relationships. She's also a beloved teacher.
She is.
New York Magazine named her one of the great teachers of New York City.
And I'm not kidding. When you came the last time, Patty, where are you? Over there. When you came the last time, you had students that were from like 20 years ago that were like crying because they were so happy to see you again. Like, that's special.
We love teaching. It's true.
You are a special person.
Thanks.
Very cool. Christina, make sure we let's introduce everybody, right?
Sure. So you want, let me finish.
Yeah,
so she earned an MFA in writing from Columbia University and a BA from University of Oregon, and is taught at Fairfield County Writer Studio, Sarah Lawrence Writing Institute, and the West Side YMCA. She's married to journalist Michael Hill and has 1 son and 2 stepsons. She returns here for the 3rd time. I thought it was 2nd, but this is, I'm just so happy to have her.
Yep.
everyone, this is Patty Dann.
Yes, but we're going to do I'm going to do all the introductions. So let's do the next one.
So do you want to get,
I want to get everybody on here so we
our
can
next
show
reader-
off our stars.
our next reader is Julia Glass. She's the author of 5 previous books of fiction, including the best-selling 3 Junes, which won the National Book Award, and I See You Everywhere, winner.
Incidentally, won the National Book Award in addition to being a bestseller.
It's an aside. And she's the winner of the Binghamton University John Gardner Fiction Book Award. Other published works include The Spindle, Single Chairs in the Rafters, and essays in several anthologies. She's a recipient of fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York Foundation for the Arts, and the Radcliffe Institute for an Advanced Study. Glass is a distinguished writer in residence at Emerson College. She lives with her family in Marblehead, Massachusetts.
And some dogs.
Yes, some very loud dogs.
Some awesome
Some
dogs.
barky dogs.
So my 19-year-old who's here home from college is watching them, but even with him watching them, they have a lot of opinions.
So every time you see Julia leap for the screen, she's actually trying to mute herself. So don't mind her. Okay, one more. Oh wait, is that it?
Yep. Our final reader tonight is Trey Ellis,
Yay!
novelist, screenwriter, essayist, and professor at Columbia University.
Hey, Columbia. Oh,
Yeah, woo! He's the author of Bedtime Stories, Adventures in the Land of Single Fatherhood. His acclaimed first novel, Platitudes, was reissued by Northeastern University Press, along with his influential essay, The New Black Aesthetic. He's also the author of Home Repairs and Right Here, Right Now, which was a recipient of the American Book Award.
yeah, American Book Award. It's like award versus award here.
His work for the screen includes the Emmy-nominated Tuskegee Airmen and Good Fences, starring Danny Glover and Whoopi Goldberg.
Movie versus movie.
It was shortlisted for the Penn Award for Best Teleplay of the Year. His essays have appeared in the New York Times, Vanity Fair, GQ, Playboy, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, and others. He always contributes to NPR, All Things Considered. His first play, Fly, was produced and performed at Lincoln Center Institute.
Yeah,
The
his first play went into Lincoln Center. Like, look, we just like sit with that a minute. We'll be talking about that later. Go on.
As well as Pasadena Playhouse and the New Victory Theater in New York. He lives in Westport, Connecticut with his wife and 3 children.
This is going to be so much fun, you guys.
Yeah, he's also Associate Professor of Film at Columbia University.
You're so fancy. You're also fancy. Let's do a little round of oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. I'm so
Thanks,
excited.
you too. Thanks, Patty and Julia.
This is really exciting. All right. Who's first?
It's Patty.
All right, here we
Our first
go.
reader is Patty.
Wait just a minute. We're going to set her up so that she can do her reading. Hold on. Boom.
Hi. I've never written a book like this. This is a historical novel or fictional history, whatever you want to call it, about Catherine Wright, who was the Wright sister of Wilbur and Orville. And as you all know, the airplane was invented in 1903, and then Wilbur, Orville, and their sister Catherine lived quite happily in Dayton, Ohio. This book takes place in 1926 when something dramatic happens. The book is in 2 parts. It's part diary and part letters imagined by myself. I'm just going to read one short diary entry. The first diary entry of the book takes place November 21st, 1926. On November 20th, 1926, I was 52 when I got married for the first and only time to Harry Haskell. But my brother Orv, with whom I share a birthday, refused to attend the festivities. This was just yesterday at 4 p.m. When Orv heard of my upcoming nuptials last year, he smashed the blue and white Limoges china pitcher full of daisies against the wall of our summer house on Lake Huron. Everyone in the world knows Orv as the Wright brother who has a mustache and wears zigzag socks, ones that I knit every year with the soft yarn from the sheep outside of Dayton he insists upon because of his sensitive feet. the flowers scattered like an exploded bridal bouquet as the water and bits of china littered the floor. It has occurred to me more than once that although Orv is brilliant, ingenious, extraordinary, and able to study the subtle arc of a seagull's wings and to create an invention that has changed the entire planet, unfortunately, he might also be insane. I do not say such a thing lightly or with any disrespect. I love Orv in what some say is an uncommon love. But I think all love is uncommon if it's worth its salt. I'm calling this diary my marriage diary, as conjugal life is such a new adventure for me. I do not know how I will fare with this curious tie that binds. This diary is nothing fancy, just a worn, toffee-colored notebook I have saved from my Oberlin days. There's a nifty envelope inside the back cover where I keep some precious drawings of my scribbles and designs. I'm writing in the most beautiful heron blue ink that Orv gave me as a Christmas gift just 2 years ago, when my life seemed to be quite humdrum after years of living with the most famous brothers to ever leave the earth. I keep the diary in a locked box with copies of letters I've begun to write to Orv. Not that I imagine Harry or the housemaid would be interested. I vow to take these new seasons of my life, fall and winter, and begin anew, to be bold where I have been timid and strong where I have hesitated. I have always been a woman of science and scholarly pursuits, along with my work for the rights of women. But in my new life, I hope to be able to write some truths about another kind of rights, secrets both professional and personal, aspects that have been previously hidden. We discussed much in the Wright household, but there was much we did not say. It will not come easily to me to reveal what was for so long concealed, as I am the Reverend's daughter. Have to go meet Harry for his friends for drinks, more tomorrow. Thank you. And so it continues, letters and diary entries.
That's very, very cool. Yay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so what's so amazing about this book, it's so easy to read and it's so well written, but what's so amazing about it is no one's ever given a thought to the Wright sister. Like, I didn't even know she existed until I read this book. So Patty, how did you decide that you were gonna, did you know about her, or did you come across some information?
And why fiction and not nonfiction if you have this secret knowledge of this secret person?
So many questions. I have to say, I've always been obsessed with the Wright brothers. The reason for that, I'm not entirely clear, but I went on my honeymoon to Kitty Hawk, and I like them the way I like Theo and Vincent van Gogh. These just very intense, creative guys. And someone sent me a picture of Catherine, Orville, and Wilbur at the White House. And it was the first time I'd seen a picture of Catherine. She wore this great hat. And I did a little research, and none of those three ever married until at 52. In fact, Catherine married a man she went to Columbia, where did they go? To college with. And the boys didn't go. So it was sort of curious. Catherine went to college, but was supposed to take care of the family because the mother had died. And in fact, Orville refused to speak to her ever again.
After she got married?
After she got married at 52. So she moved from Dayton, where they had this little life, Wilbur had died young, to Kansas City, which is 600 miles away. And she married Harry Haskell, a widower journalist. And I married for the second time in my 50s to a widower journalist as well. So I became obsessed on a personal level.
Nice.
I'm interested in sort of the fact of falling in love and estrangement at the same time, which often happens.
That's neat. And why did you choose to write it as a book? It's a book. As a fiction. Hello. My proclivities are showing. Why did you decide to write it as a novel instead of as a biography?
I am not a scholar, and I always thought I was write only fiction. I have written a few nonfiction books, but they were about personal things. So I'm, I just don't think I have this sort of scholarly work ethic to do that much. And there isn't that much on Catherine, in fact. There weren't letters to Orville. I invented them.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
So that's very cool. All right. Shall we hear our next? Who's next?
Yes. And our next reader is Julia Glass. And I just want to give a shout out to Just DeCourcy Hines for helping us
For connecting us.
to Julia, because I'm so happy that we have Julia. We're so lucky. And thank you, Jess. I know you're out there.
All right. Now let's listen to Julia Glass. Ready, set, go.
Thank you, guys. Okay. So I'm going to do something a little crazy here. I'm actually going to read from the book that I just turned in to my editor, and I'm supposed to be revising over a break from my teaching. So this is brand new. At least
we love previews.
We'll see what this goes. So the tentative title of this novel is In a Time of Tempest. And it takes place about a dozen years from now in a New England seaside town that's been somewhat protected from a lot of things going on in the world. And it's told from, I think, 7 or 8 points of view. We'll see how that holds up. And one of the characters, I'm going to read, this is about a quarter maybe of the way into the book. One of the important characters is a woman named Margot. She's in her late 50s. She's a retired public school English teacher, greatly beloved in the community. And there's been a recent scandal, which is that her husband has just left her for the wife in another couple. Both couples are very well regarded in the community. And so this is Margot. I noticed that I seem to have a penchant for writing angry characters. I sound a little strident. We'll see how this goes. I'm finding 4:30 unbearable. 4:30 is unfucking bearable. AM or PM, take your pick. And there I am in a metaphorical dinghy without oars. I can see the shore, cocktail hour or morning light, your choice again. But I cannot get there without jumping overboard. The meager distance between me and that pathetically Pavlovian destination is torture in and of itself. Shallow water infested with sharks on the early patrol, man-o-war jellies come fin du jour. Mornings, I get up, make coffee, stare out the kitchen window, and dare the sky not to pale toward that deceptively coy pink of which it is so pompously and perpetually proud. I feel like torching every treacly ode to dawn I ever taught. Where is Sylvia Plath when you need her the most? Dawn, the perfect rose of bathwater sluicing blood from a lacerated vein. Overkill? Purple prose? Well, I was the teacher, never the poet. Mine the job of exposition, extrapolation, yet keeping the pupil awake with sudden swerves. Afternoons, at least I can strategize. Today, the first grocery safari I've made since, as I've come to call it, the decamping. It felt paradoxically like one of the countless masked and gloved expeditions I'd make back in early pandemic when, shopping for 5, yet striving to forage enough to feed us for at least a solid week, I learned to engineer a pyramid of produce rising from one of those behemoth carts. This time, I was shopping for 1, but McCoy's grocery felt like just as much of a minefield where, once again, other people are the source of dread. When I make it back through the kitchen door just before 5, I realize the tile guy is still working in the bathroom. Either that or a large rodent has moved in, complete with ghastly soundtrack. I told Bucky, everyone's favorite contractor, I'd pay extra for Saturday. Just get it done. I would never confess that I dread the silence of the empty house. I am a living redundancy, I realize. The wife not so much replaced as deleted, just as I might take my green pen, never read, how trite would that be, and blithely score through a student's unnecessary adverb when the verb can stand on its philandering own. I set my sacks on the kitchen table and head upstairs. Yes, there he is, down on his knees, a position in which I like to see any man these days, hard at work on the floor of what will be my double shower, a gesture of futility or hope. I wave at him when he looks up. We exchange faux casual haze, and back downstairs I go. To hell with smaller quantities, I decided, to shopping like a spinster sparrow. One of our guilty, extravagant pleasures, and a blessing during times of plague, was always the basement freezer, the sort of wattage guzzling colossus used by modern frontiersmen to store an entire elk, or by mass murderers to hoard and preserve the remains of missing teenagers. I can tell you this. Tom is going to pine for my gritty sense of humor, the chief side effect of having to police my own mouth all day, 5 days a week, in a public school with eyes and ears in every room, temperature sensors at the entrance, and bulletproof glass in the windows. Tom said he could always tell when I'd spent the day teaching Dickinson or Wordsworth or Billy fucking Lanyard Collins because my language was spicier and my taste in movies crude. Not that we don't all revere the curiously immortal Miss Emily, at least in moderate doses. I realize as I hit the switch to the basement light that I haven't been down there either since being here alone. Like all the dungeons that pass as cellars in these ancient houses, it's a creepy, hazardous place. Rocks protruding like tumors run amok through the earthen floor. But ours, unlike many others, never floods, though the walls are lined with raw timber shelves that Tom installed 20 years ago. The old furnace, long defunct, still hovers at the back, a rusting heifer, its removal too messy to face. When I lift the freezer's heavy lid, the cold, smoky light of its interior greets me like a spirit medium. Inside are 3 tubs of ice cream, a gift box of fancy chocolates with boozy centers, a package of that horrible synthetic crab meat that Tom liked to buy on his cheapskate days, last summer's strawberries, frostbitten to the core by now, and a bag of ice for the picnic cooler, also a relic of summer. Or maybe it's left over from our Christmas party, apparently our last, which makes me flash on Deanne, that vile cunt, who's probably fucking my husband right in this freezer, red rucked up past her tits, while directly above their sweaty heads, I served cups of fizzy punch to the revelers, jolly as a matron in Regency Bath, scheming to pair off one of the young bucks with one of my daughters. And actually, yes, all 3 of my daughters had been home for that party for the first time in years, along with several of their local friends. "Halloo, you're back from the wars," Tom would bellow as he greeted members of the younger generation returned for a holiday or family occasion. Not funny, I'd tell him in a whisper. Not in a world broken out like a virulent rash in wars too many to count. I add to the freezer packages of prefab burritos, soups, and soy sausages, a carton of juice concentrate, a mega freeze pack of squid ravioli, a tube of calcium paste. The freezer is still more than half empty, and I think of the wasted amps with defiance, not remorse. I should unplug it and transfer the useful items to the kitchen fridge, but then what if I need a place to stash a body? Tell me, Sherlock. What then? Glad you laughed.
I love what you said, Julia, about how you seem to write angry, and I think that's
not all the characters are angry.
well, you don't shy away from it, and I think that's really interesting, because I think there are authors who would tend to shy away from it, and I find that so amazing. Like, how do you, when you write, and how do you like harness all your all of that onto the page, and how much of it gets edited out afterwards, and how much stays? Do you feel it out, or how does that go?
Well, first of all, I'm an overwriter. Every book that I have ever turned in has pretensions of war and peace. And I like to joke that my editor, and by the way, I have had the same editor going on 7 books now. It's very rare nowadays. Wow. Same agent, same publicist. I mean, such incredible.
Don't you guys think that editors should get a byline? Like,
yeah, well, I
sometimes
my editor in the acknowledgments, and she's very modest, and she told me that she actually doesn't think that, except for historical fiction, there should be acknowledgments. But I always have them anyway. But my joke about her is that if she weren't a great editor, she'd be a really amazing diet coach, because she really helps slow down my books. And so, but when I get a voice like that, Margot's voice here, and she's one of, I can't remember if it's 7 or 8 voices in this novel, I can really run with any strong emotion. I actually, Trey, I'm so envious of playwrights. I really want to write a play. I love going to the theater. I hope we'll all be able to go to the theater, the real theater, again soon. And to just really listen to a voice. I mean, I don't always write in the first person, but when I do, that's the pleasure of the first person, is the voice is the story. So I have to say Margot is definitely one of the most fun characters for me, but and the husband, by the way, whose wife has run off with her husband, has completely become this melancholy, sad guy, and she kind of brings him back to life, not romantically, but they become sort of partners in crime.
Well, you also have a fan who's watching who said there's no such thing as too many angry female characters. Absolutely delightful. So,
in the graduate program where I teach, who would tell me that too.
And just incidentally, Patty, I wanted to also tell you that somebody said The Wright Sister was one of the books that kept me thinking about their relationship for a long time afterwards. So you do have fans out there. There are fans watching. Anyway, but back to you, Julia. 4:30 a.m. is the loathsome, and 4:30 p.m. are both loathsome hours. You're dead on.
I was actually
there, almost there.
Patty, didn't she get married at 4:30?
Yeah, I had her. Yeah, it was at the end of the day.
How coincidental. Okay. The final reader.
Oh, yeah. Okay, ready? It's going to be Trey. Are we ready for him?
Yes. Thank you, Trey, for being here with us.
Oh, thank you for having me, guys. It's just a pleasure. I'm going to read from a book I wrote a while ago called Bedtime Stories, about my when I was a single dad raising my 2 young kids who are now older. So I'm just going to read a couple pages from the prologue. But it's all true. Sure, I got some pity right after she left us, but not nearly as much as I deserved. You'd have thought that all of those moms at my daughter's preschool would have been lining up with casseroles for a newly single dad like me. But no. After I put Ava and her brother Chet to bed, more often than not, I ended up either microwaving a healthy choice, hospital-quality frozen dinner, or nuking whatever was left from Lucia, Chet's nanny, had fixed him for lunch that day, washing it all down with a few juice boxes. They're so small. On the couch in front of HBO. Taxi Cab Confessions is one of my favorite shows, with hidden cameras all over the back of a taxi, giving us a glimpse into the real lives of late-night drunken tourists. I often fantasize about having cameras installed all over my home so people can see how I live, see what an attentive father I am. Over the course of the season, viewers would have discovered the other hurdles I vaulted, my cranky kidneys, the deaths of my parents. I would become the breakout reality hit show of the season. In my fantasy, emailed remarriage proposals would soon be spamming my inbox. Bedtime stories. Daddy, Daddy, come quick. Season premiere. Daddy, Daddy, come quick. As fast as a fireman and not fully yet conscious, since it is 4:15 in the morning, I trip toward my kids' room while trying to hop into the legs of my sweatpants. Their bathroom light is on, and inside it looks like Aerosmith just stayed there. Wet, unspooled toilet paper hanging from the medicine cabinet, an entire bottle of deliriously overpriced Mistela baby shampoo puddled on the toilet seat cover. My almost 2-year-old son is standing in the middle of the wreckage, looking confusedly at me. I only learned later, after interrogation, that his sister had to pee in the night and forgot to shut the bathroom door with a childproof plastic bulb over the knob. She then went back to bed, only to be awakened a little later by her brother's celebration. Why Chet was out of bed at 4 a.m, I don't know and never will. He still holds the pot of hair gel that he generously applied to all parts of his face and much of his hair. Debo had less product in their hair. Trying to wipe away the goop only applied it more evenly, so I gave him a warm bath, and by a little after 5, I was back in my bed, ready to be up again at 7 to get Ava to preschool. Bedtime stories. Chet leaves a present. Episode 5. I wake up to discover both kids naked and scampering happily around the room. They look like rare, almost mythical forest creatures that I feel privileged to be glimpsing in the wild. At first, vision compels me to smile. Then I start to wonder, what has become of Chet's diaper? I notice 2 little brown stains on his tiny bed. Not too disgusting, I've seen worse. A quick swipe with a wipe, a spritz with the spray and wash, and I pitch the sheets into the dirty clothes. The diaper itself I discover under his bed, miraculously immaculate. I give the kids a bath, fearlessly washing, conditioning, and detangling Ava's dramatic, massive hair like a junior Jose Hebert. Their naked splashings, Ava's queries, Daddy, why can't I marry Chet when I get older? All make me feel like the luckiest parent in the whole wide world. Those boring, ordinary 2-parent households have to share indelible moments like this. I get to greedily hoard them for myself without having to compromise with a significant other who might feel that maybe kids shouldn't be encouraged to see who can burp the loudest or play wiffle ball in the middle of the living room. In my house, I'm the czar, Trey the Terrible. I'm smiling at these happy thoughts as I walk back into the bedroom. Suddenly, I stop. Just next to my foot, on the carpet between an overturned baby stroller and a naked, headless black Ken doll with amazingly ripped abs, looms a mountain of turd nearly as large as my son. I pull Chet out of the bathtub and bring him to the cairn of shit. I don't think he ever looked cuter. Do not take your diaper off. Do not leave piles of crap all over the... It's getting too complicated. So I mid-course correct to get back on message. Do not take your diaper off. I haven't had a dog since I was 5, but I have seen people training them, so I model my tone of voice on theirs. Chet just smiles and nods. His thumb is always plugged into his mouth, his index finger hooking his nose. Mommy, daddy, he says.
Yay.
Thanks.
Woo. Hey, everybody tell us how old your kids are now, because that was, you said, from a while back, right?
Yes.
So you have old kids, young kids. I have 2.
So now Ava is 22 and Chet is 19. But I've remarried since writing this book about being a single parent. And I met my wife actually publicizing this book. And then, so I have a 14-year-old stepdaughter, and we adopted a 3-year-old 3 years ago, the day she was born. So I now have a 3-year-old.
Wow, that's a lot of chillins.
I'm going through the same diaper.
It's like refresh. It's like a manual now.
Yeah.
How about you, Julia? How old are your kids?
I have 2 sons, and one is 24 and one is 19.
Oh, lovely. And Patty?
My son is 25, and then I was widowed and I remarried man who wrote a book review of my book, and have a 31-year-old, a 35-year-old, and a grandbaby. 2 months.
Wow, congratulations. That's super exciting. And now everybody knows why you need to review books for your friends.
And I'm sure you're asked. I'm sure it's a favorable review. Must
Except for one line I've never forgotten.
Or apparently, or forgiven.
So Trey, when you were a single dad, were you more prolific than you are now, or was it the other way around? I mean, how did that go?
Yeah, I mean, I was, I had, it was certainly really rough, and then the dissolution of the marriage was really rough. My first wife had some mental illness issues, so that took a lot. So that sort of everything stopped then. And then when I became a single dad and had someone, like, we had a little room in the basement, I had someone stay there to watch the kids sometimes. So I just had to be much more efficient. And then now having a little baby, and during COVID, I'm going through sort of the same thing where she's not at school, she's not in preschool. So I'm teaching her, I'm with her. My wife is a professor and a writer herself. So I just feel like every single moment I have sort of accounted for. So I'm more prolific now just because I just don't take, and even back then, I just knew that my time was really precious. So like, I didn't just say, let me just watch a TV show. I just think, what can I be doing between the time I wake up and 10 o'clock at night? Then from 10 to 11, I say, look, I just got to like decompress.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
No, it's a lot. So
are your other kids, I'll just run through you all again, but are you quarantining with your kids? Like, have they come home to
Yeah, they came home. The big kids, Ava was a senior at Columbia, so then she graduated last year. Now she's working in Boston. And my son is a sophomore at Harvard, so they're both in Boston. So they like separately, and they rarely see each other. But for all of quarantine, they were all back at home. So like they're back in the house helping watch the little one, and just having them back home was fantastic. But they've been, out of the house again since October. So it's been hard. So I won't see them again until Christmas when they come back after quarantine.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think a lot of college kids are kind of stranded for a while.
Yeah, or coming back now. A lot of them are coming back for Thanksgiving, but since they're close enough, they didn't come for Thanksgiving. They'll come for Christmas.
So one more comment before we break out into discussion. When I was thinking about your bedtime stories, I was thinking about that book. There's a children's book. Actually, it's an adult book, and it looks like a children's book. It's called Go to Effing Sleep.
Yeah, Sam Jackson read it too.
You have a lot more patience than I actually bought this book, and I cherish it because it was like the one time I could actually read something that acknowledged how frustrated I was getting and made me laugh. But so how did you decide to write about these experiences with your kids during this period? How did they become bedtime stories?
Right. So I started writing the book while they're already older, because I'm in the middle of it. It was too sort of painful. But all of my books are a little bit like the romans of clay. So I like to steal from my life. And this time I just thought, well, like my second book, Home Repairs, was literally sort of my diary from 16 to 30, then reworked and fictionalized. So I thought this time I wanted to be more brave about it and just sort of lay it out there, lay these truths out there, and try my hand at something new, try my hand at creative nonfiction, because I'd already written.
Did you have a different reception from people that you knew when you put it out there as nonfiction as opposed to? Yeah,
they definitely like, because there's a lot of like the beginning, there's a lot of sex in it. There's a lot of like, pain, a lot of different things. So some people just only read the sex. It feels like they just skim to get to the.
Page 48, 39, and 2.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot more to the book than that. And then other people, they just, were just surprised that that I have sort of no filter, no shame, like just sort of put out there. It was interesting.
That's interesting. And even though you said the novels sort of have a thinly veiled fictionalized quality,
right, like once you see their fiction, that they didn't see them as me so much. So this one, that is me, and then I fictionalized some of the. I changed the names of some people so they wouldn't sue me, but basically,
That was wise.
it's just not true.
Oh, that's interesting.
Wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about. I think Trey, you were a single parent at one point. Patty, you were too. I don't think you were, Julia, right? But so recently I feel like I'm a single parent. I'm not. But I feel like I am, only because my husband has one kid and I have one kid, and we're in different places. We're in different locations. And it's so weird. And it takes so much. It's like twice the effort when you're a single parent, because everything is kind of on you. And I find that like I'm not as efficient. And I'd love to learn. Please tell me how to be more efficient with my time and figure out how to sit down and actually focus and write. Trey or Patty?
Patty, how did you do it?
Well, so I married late the first time, and my husband was from Holland, and then we adopted a baby from Lithuania, and I had this beautiful little family. And then when my son was 3.5, my husband got brain cancer, and so. And he died at home, and I took care of him. So, my whole plan went out the window. So I think, it wasn't even a question of how can I write? It's just sort of survival. And being a widow with child, it was so new. I would say the main thing is it affected my writing. I always thought I was going to write fiction. And I wrote about the loss and adopting my son. And so it would just turn me inside out. But before I couldn't have the phone. I had to have everything just so. My husband was going to take him to soccer. So, I wrote with my son on my lap. You just do it. It's one of those things. How people would say, how can you do it? You do it. And, it's all sort of compost heap for creativity, I think. That's.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that the same way I used to say. I remember my first book I read, those Paris Review interviews, and so I thought, okay, I'll write 4 hours a day every day, and that's how I'm going to write my books, like 6 or 7 days a week, and I'll get my book done. That's how I did my first book, living overseas, and then even when I was married, with my wife, it's just we had that time before the babies were there, and then now it's like I'm much less precious. So. If there's, I don't know if you guys know about the Pomodoro method, but so I have these Pomodoro. I'd read about this thing of these 20-minute timer thing. So if I have, 20 minutes, I just think, what can I do in these 20 minutes? Or if I have to unload the dishwasher, I just think, okay, I've got a problem. I'm stuck in the writing. I've got to work over this problem in my head. Let me unload the dishwasher while I'm working over this problem.
Oh, I really like that switch where instead of I've got housework. What can I do for my writing while I'm doing the cleaning? That's kind of.
And also just think, okay, well, it usually doesn't work, but if I'm writing, I think, so what if they're unloading the dishwasher? Of course, would that be? It's probably not, but I like, you just kind of maybe find something. If you look, you'll find something.
Yeah.
Julia, how about you? How do you make yourself more productive?
Well, first of all, I had my kids pretty late, and I also became serious about writing kind of late. I'd been a painter through my 20s, and I came back to writing fiction for the first time since high school in my early 30s. And then I went through a really terrible period in my mid 30s where I was divorced, and I was diagnosed with cancer, and my only sibling killed herself. I mean, it was just my 30s they just sucked. And so but then I got together with my now husband, and we had our sons when I was 39 and 44. And, my husband's business, when we had our first son, we were living in New York in a really small apartment. I was putting together a freelance life. I did magazine articles, I did copy editing, but I was trying to work on my fiction, submitting stories, being rejected. And he was a photographer with his own business, and his hours were really, really long. I mean, he'd leave at like 10 in the morning, and he might come back at 2 the following morning. I mean, he might stop by at home to say hello or something. But so while I wasn't a single parent and I knew he was always coming home, when Alec, our oldest, was a baby, I had to keep doing my freelance work and try to make time for my fiction. I learned to breastfeed at the computer, like holding the baby and going like this. And also, I really began to understand, and I think that if I couldn't actually write, and I do write at a keyboard like this for days, this is where the writing takes place, really. And it alleviated me of a lot of guilt. I actually read an interview in Poets and Writers around that time with the author Peter Cameron, someone I really admired. And he said the lion's share of writing is just thinking. And then I began to realize if I could walk out in the world doing my errands, or I'd have the baby here, or then when he was in the stroller, if he was sleeping or if I was shopping, I would be thinking about my characters, just engaging, marinating in my fiction. But here's another thing, and this is what this organization is all about, but I've always been a little exasperated by that question. How do you do it? Also because you never see that leveled, or rarely, at a man at a reading, but if they know you have kids. But here's what happened to me. I felt I was working on a novel when I could, off and on, when my older son was born. And I looked at him and I thought, it's now or never. Having that baby lit a fire under me because I thought I have to support him. And I am not going to support him being a copy editor, freelance copy editor for the rest of my life. My husband's not an investment banker. And I don't even really remember how I did it, but I didn't hold myself to write at this hour, write this many. And I read so many, pieces of advice from writers who'd say, well, if you don't write, this amount per day, you're not a serious writer. If you don't, they're always this very didactic thing to writing guides. And it took a long time for me to feel serious about my writing when I was not writing every day, or I was not having quotas. I was really just what I'd always been good at as a child. I was a daydreamer, and retaining those daydreams until you can get that hour, 20 minutes or whatever at the computer and just go madly like this and get it in while the baby's napping, or we had a part-time babysitter after my older son was 7 months old, and or then when they go to preschool, and you just you figure it out. I mean, I have to say, not having a routine, not having a predictable, and it's still true, time of day when I write, I sometimes hold a book that I wrote and I think, when did this get written? I don't remember writing this.
Yeah.
All these words came out of me. But, it's kind of like childbirth, I guess. You don't.
Like, how did this come out of me?
You don't want to remember that. No, so yeah. But I have to say that I often say to people about having children that when your children are small, your life is undoubtedly narrowed. For instance, one thing I didn't realize about having babies, and we had a lot of really good single friends, some of whom never intended to have children, some of whom were trying very hard to have children. And you just don't see those people as often. And then your child gets to the age where they choose who they're going to hang out with. And if they don't like the children of your friends, they preschool, like, no. And so you end up spending this time with a babysitter or a mom you have nothing in common with. I mean, you have children in common, and that's great. So your life becomes kind of narrower, but it becomes so much deeper. When my older son started to ask me about everything from, sex and death, always earlier than you planned, it's like, oh my God, I wasn't ready for the death question. He's brushing his teeth and he's 3 years old. Am I going to die? And you're like, what? All those questions.
Not today, honey.
Or why? Or about homeless people. I mean, we lived in Manhattan, and why is that man sleeping on the sidewalk? Every question, as they ask you all these questions, I never have felt the imperative to be so truthful in my life as when 9/11, we lived in downtown Manhattan on 9/11, and my 5-year-old was as curious as they come. Why did those men fly those planes I could just list all the questions that I've had to answer, and I just can't bullshit. But I'm I feel both protective but respectful. So all I'm saying is, for all the way in which your life can be sort of strained by having children, and you get back to your life, but I just confronted having to know how I felt about some very important things in a way that I really had never thought about so deeply.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it doesn't help, I think, to resent them for stopping you from the things you're trying to do. But still now with the 3-year-old, now with my new 3-year-old, I forget, I wonder if I have less patience now, but I definitely, she's the cutest thing in the world, but every day I yell at her something. Just like I'm trying to do something, like write something or just before I forget. And then she's like, just literally like trying to like type on the same keyboard or dump her juice onto the key, just like sabotage me, So just like, you've got to, so it's crazy making. But of course, also having the older kids too, I understand that, I still, I'll miss it terribly when she's bigger. Already she's bigger. And I'm just like, it's hard. So it's like I'm pulled both ways.
It's interesting working on this book about the Wright sister. I mean, she was a teacher, but teachers were not allowed to be married at the beginning of, so that we have this extraordinary freedom that we're talking about balancing children and lovers or partners, but women were not allowed to be married because that would mean they'd have kids or have sex or anything. So I just feel like, at least I feel quite privileged to have all these choices at this point. And then also versus, yes, it was difficult being a single mother, and yet because of COVID, I haven't seen my son in a year. So there's this longing. So we are very lucky to have these children, obviously.
And me now with the big kids, when the three of us are together, we have this, because we spent, I think I was single for like 9 years before I got remarried. I just feel like there's the three of us, the three grown people together now, we have this bond. And it was like certainly the hardest thing I ever did, but I'm just, super glad I did it. I think it made it better for everybody.
It's very rich. We have a question from the comment section for you guys. Are you writing more during COVID, or are you finding it harder to write because of being, all this, because of the extra?
Yeah, I'm writing a lot more. I mean, I also am teaching at Columbia in the MFA film program, and I tell them all, I just think there's nothing better for a writer than a plague and isolation. I think you're going to kick yourself when coming out of here. Just like, the real, like I was thinking of, I wrote the first book in Florence, and I was in this, my school at Stanford had a villa up above, right near where Boccaccio's writing the Decameron, right? And that's the whole idea of it, right? These people telling these stories while the plague is going on. So I just think when the real life comes in and you have to run out and do so many different things and socialize, you're gonna wish you had that time to get this work done.
That's right. How about you, Julia?
So I have to confess that for the first few months, first of all, I couldn't, like a lot of people, I couldn't stop looking at the news. I could not stop looking at the New York Times, which is my homepage. I also had both of my sons home, which was wonderful. But my older son, the short answer is I really didn't write between March, April, and May. But I had to get a draft of this novel done, and in the summer I really just bore down hard, and I did it, and I needed to turn that draft in at the end of August when I started a new semester of teaching at Emerson. But I really, I recognized how lucky I was to have both of my sons. So my older son had spent his first year post-college in New York, the struggling actor thing. And I am so glad that he was living in Queens, that I got him to come home in March. But he was completely in limbo for 3 months. He didn't have friends, hanging out with your parents. His politics are like anarchist compared to ours. I mean, we're all, it was like, I get these terrible political arguments with him about, he was a big Bernie bro, and I was like, Biden will be fine. And, and I thought, I can't believe this is happening. So it was sort of the best and the worst of being locked down with him. But I went into major cooking, feeding, and eating mode. I mean, I think that was like, I just cooked like a crazy person. there was dessert all the time. Creativity, you know. So, but it was, and then my older son left for California in mid-June and went away for 3 months to be with his girlfriend there. And now he's actually here in our town in Massachusetts, living with his girlfriend and his girlfriend's mother in an apartment down the street. And my younger one's home from college. So we're together again for this stretch of it. And I'm just, you know, this to me is, I am blessed. So.
How about you, Patty?
I think feel very privileged. I'm somewhat lonely and feel longing for my son. My mother died during COVID, so certain emotions are quite intensified, but I can write about that. My students are writing more, but I'm sort of an introvert. I don't like parties. So I'm going for walks and seeing people outside individually is just my speed. So, I have not suffered personally from COVID, so I feel very privileged. Yeah.
So here's a question for you. We're coming upon the new year, and there's so many writers. Of course, everyone's like, my New Year's is I'm going to finish my book, right? Like, but it's so hard to actually kind of get through adversity sometimes. Like, do you have any advice? All of you have gone through something traumatic during your life, and you've still continued to write. So is there any advice you could give people going into this new year, like how to push through and write or do that thing that they want to do?
Yeah, I mean, with Julie, I think you're lucky to not needing a schedule. I find for me and for my, well, I don't really have a schedule with my students. I insist they have some kind of a schedule to build it in, because that's what I had in the beginning. I think for beginning writers, getting some kind of schedule going, so you sort of know what it's like when you're sort of working in the sort of deeper level of because I think if you're just dipping in that 20 minutes and never have done sort of the longer stints, it's hard to get into that kind of zone. So I think that's helpful. I think that the idea that you have to be hard on yourself, but also forgiving. And I think if you say, am I heading in the direction of finishing this book? No matter, then that's something. I think if you say, look, I'm gonna write 5 pages a day, you're probably deluding yourself. But if you say, I'm gonna head in the direction every week, I'm gonna head in the direction of finishing this book with your head down and don't keep looking up towards the end. After a month of that, or probably 6 or 8 weeks of that, you look up and you go, whoa, I'm kind of far from shore, right? Like, that's kind of cool. Like, I'm further than I thought I would be. If you just keep looking up and go, am I done yet? You're never going to finish that book.
Yeah, that's the marathon technique. Right. You only look at the steps right in front of you and not at the end line.
I think it's really important. I think it's also important, to say to yourself that I'm a writer. I'm not just writing this one thing that has to be perfect, and then I'm going to die and then I'm going to become famous, right? Then there's too much pressure on that one piece. If you say, I'm a writer, I'm beginning this life as a writer, so I'm taking this step as a writer, and I'm writing this thing now. This is the thing that I'm writing now. When this is done, I'll write the next thing that I'm going to write.
That's great.
One of my graduate students, I ask all my graduate students to write a reflection at the end of the semester. And it's not, I said, this is not the class evaluation you're going to fill out for the school. This is about you and this semester. Well, as you can imagine, I'm getting them now. And I thought, oh my God, what kind of a Pandora's box was I opening? I mean, I'm struggles and very moving. But one of my students who said she's had an exceptionally productive time said that she started, and this sounds kind of cliched, but she said, I started keeping a notebook for the first time, and I could write anything I wanted in that notebook. She's working on a YA novel on the over. But rather than be hard on myself when I can't feel like I can't add to the novel, I just open this notebook and I just write in it. And I'm not a journal keeper, but I certainly am a believer. So, people talk about writer's block, and I want to say something that may sound kind of ornery, but I don't believe that there is such a thing as writer's block. This is what I think. You write well, you write badly. Sometimes writing is fun or feels jazzes you up, and sometimes it takes everything out of you and it feels pointless. But it's no different from any other job. I mean, as I say to my students, did you ever have the plumber not be able to show up to fix the sink because they had plumber's block? Did you ever get on a plane where they said, I'm sorry, the airplane can't take off because there's pilot's block? Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't go well. And when it doesn't go well, don't have some sort of superstitious idea about it. Either take time off and acknowledge that you're taking time off, or just write crappy stuff, or write in a notebook, or write something else. Some people have found, some fiction writers I know have found it really productive to just write about what's going on right now. Just write about what it feels like to go through this, to go through not just the pandemic, but the election, and, just write about that. And that's still writing. You're still writing, and you'll circle back to whatever your project is. But I also agree with you, Trey. You just have to keep on. You're in that little boat, and it's like, oh, I'm that far from shore. I'm 56 pages from shore. And there's another shore out there, but you can't worry about seeing it yet.
Right.
I just tell my students, and I do myself, is try to fill a page. If you just do one sentence, then it's one sentence. Don't beat yourself up about it. And I remember my son used to say, oh, you're just writing scribble scrabble. Well, even if it's scribble scrabble, that, even if you're saying, why can't I hear a voice, write that down. And I also find sometimes to sort of jumpstart me, if I retype what I typed the previous day, it sort of gets me going.
Huh, that's interesting. Very good.
Concrete.
I want to ask you guys, this is like, it's unusual for us to have such extraordinary, like 3 superstars at the same time. Like all of you have done such magical things. I want to know, if you don't mind, could you just talk about those moments? Like what was it like for you before, for instance, you won the National Book Award, just before your play was produced on Lincoln Center, just before Cher was signed to do Mermaids? Like what was that little arc of, like, did it go like a screenplay? Like, did it go like, oh, and here it's getting better and better and better, and then, oh, there's Cher and she's going to be in my movie, and now I'm a famous writer? Like, did it do like in a beautiful, like, step-by-step way, or was it like this, like, I want to hear this little story climaxing with, and then I did this amazing thing, please? Anyone?
Well, that's not my story.
Let's hear it, Patty.
I wrote for 15 years. I didn't sell anything. And then when I was 36, I sold my first novel. A year later, it was made into a movie. It was a very lonely time of my life. My boyfriend had left me. I still had to confront at that point, it was a typewriter, blank page. In some ways, some of it was a bit overwhelming, but no, there is no arc.
So, but literally you were like struggling, and then suddenly successful? Like there was a phone call and you were like, what? Like how fast did it go?
I never thought of myself as successful. I thought, finally, I've sold this darn book I've worked on. And I was happy and lonely and happy and lonely, just like regular life.
Right.
Say.
Regular life with Cher.
No, I was not with Cher.
No, I know.
I did not hang out.
No.
Yeah.
But that's okay. So that's really cool.
But the fact that you're asking that sort of big shadow, Trey, you've dealt with this, and Julia, I mean, movies are so big that even what you imagine alone with your typewriter, suddenly, I did not imagine Cher. I imagined somebody else, but now I see her too. And so it can be a bit of a big mantle, I think. Yeah. So I think it was harder than that. But I never thought of myself as a successful person. I just think of myself as a writer teacher.
And yet here you are on our Superstar Salon.
Yeah.
I think that's part of that's just the neuroses of being a writer. I think that you don't want to be a member of a club that'll have you. So when the things happen to my friends, I'm like, oh my God, you did this thing. Wow, that's so incredible. but when it happened to me, I'm like, oh, it happens, and then I move on to the next thing. I mean, it wasn't like I had a very it's just the short story. Like I was living in Italy, writing that first book, and then but I had started in college, like as a senior with Gilbert Sorrentino, with my teacher, who's this great experimental novelist. I'd written the first chapters, and then I finished it, and I just wanted to be like, you know, I came back to New York and spent 2 years trying to find an agent, and then he sold it. It was a vintage contemporary, so I was 24 when my first book came out, and I'm 58 right now, and so. It was this thing of like this book, and it came out right after like Bright Lakes Big City and E.J. McInerney. I thought I was going to be like one of these guys. I remember going to see my editor Earl Morris, and he was like Jay McInerney's guys, and they said he's going to take you to like Lute's for, you know, to some fancy thing. And I was, you know, never even eaten, you know, never even been past the place. So like I go to meet him, and I'm put on my the same suit I got. I graduated high school in like this, you know, 3-piece things. You try to, you know, dress up, and I show up, and he's like, "Why are you dressed up?" And he takes me to some sushi bar around the corner. It just, you know, it just was not. You just think it's going to be all these things, like, and it was different. It was really great, you know, things happened, but since they happened to me, they just sort of moved on to do other things. That, you know, there's some, you know, benchmarks in your life. The one thing I'll brag about there was crazy that like I'd tried to get in the New Yorker forever since I was 16 at boarding school. I'd sent like probably most people send a short story, and got a rejection, of course, at 16. Who would think they'd reject a 16-year-old? But then
I sent poems in high school.
It's crazy, right? So then I was writing all this stuff, and then just during COVID, I wrote a piece. I had a Shouts and Murmur 2 weeks ago, and so that's like literally 42 years of like, I'd had stuff in NewYorker.com, but it's still even a large piece. There was like 3,000 words, but it didn't matter to me because I just decided to myself that I had to be in print, in there, you know what I mean, in the magazine, in a thing, so that when they were holding this thing about Trump, I just was like, and as soon as it came, I got it framed, I have it there. It's just like that was like my thing that I didn't. But other things happened in my life. They just sort of happen, and they I think only because I had it as a child, like I wanted that like before I died, you know. It was just it was very arbitrary.
I think for me, it was the most exciting things was to see my book in other languages. That was fun, you know, and because I love language. Yeah,
that's super cool.
How about you, Julia?
Well, so, you know, Trey, it's like a first novel at 24. Oh my God, you know, so my first novel, 3 Junes, was published when I was 46, and that year before, so that was in 2002, and the year leading up to that, you know, my agent sold 3 Junes, and it, you know, she sent it out, and I got some very nice rejections. One publisher wanted it, and I tell my students this, you know, that book that won the National Book Award, only one editor wanted that book, and it only takes one. It's like
smart
editor.
Right.
Yes. Well, and she, you know, and she, by the way, had been an editor, a fiction editor at the New Yorker for a long time, and may have seen some of the stories that I submitted and never got published. I've not been published in the New Yorker, but so in 2001, that horrible year, that summer before 9/11, I had a recurrence of my cancer, and my younger son was 4 months old, and my older son was 4 going on 5. And I had to go through 6 months of incredibly tough chemotherapy. And I worked, and I had these kids, and I mean, it was really hard, but I was also, the novel was going through the pipeline, and my publisher was so good to me. And my book came out in May of 2002, and I'd finished chemo in January. And of course, we'd gone through 9/11 while I was having chemo, the whole thing, you know, so awful. But this was the light at the end of the tunnel, my first novel coming out and going on a little tiny tour. And it was very exciting. And I got back just enough hair. So I looked like a Ken doll. So, and then in November, the National Book Awards, if you see a photograph of me accepting, I can't believe it's me. It's like I have this like militant short haircut. It looks fine, but it's just not me at all. Anyway, so, you know, it was a dream come true, and it was incredible. And also, I had not gone to an MFA program, I didn't meet other fiction writers and get to talk shop until after winning that award, because people were like, "Who is this?" But sure. some people snubbed me and some people were really generous. And when my book came in paperback, I got to go on tour for a little bit with Richard Russo, who just won the Pulitzer Prize, and I worshiped him. And so all these dreams came true. But I have to tell you, so this is a mom story. My wonderful older son, I mean, both my sons were wonderful now, but he was in kindergarten when I won the award. And we were living in the West Village. And, you know, maybe most of you will know my neighborhood bookstore was 3 Lives. And I had my first reading there that like 9 of my friends came to, and my knees were shaking. And Toby Cox, who is the bookseller there, was wonderful to me. So the day after I won the National Book Award, I had to go on my life. I'm walking with my little one in the stroller and my older son Alec beside me, and we're going to Gourmet Garage to shop for dinner.
Yes.
It goes on, right? You know, there was no tiara. So we are
Where's the cook?
Waverly Place, approaching the corner of 3 Lives, which we would turn the corner to go to Gourmet Garage. And there's a sign in the window. It's on a little easel, and somebody has lettered in this beautiful kind of calligraphy, "Congratulations, Julia."
Oh.
And I stopped with the stroller, and I'm looking at the sign, and my older son, who can read, and he sees the sign, and he says, "Is that you, Mom?" I said, "Yes, it is." And he said to me, "Are you famous?" Tiny bit famous. And I just started bawling. It was like all the things that I had gone through. And, so, that was my moment. But it did launch me. I mean, it also allowed me to get a bigger advance for my second novel, which allowed me to do less freelance work, though I didn't stop, so that I could I was able to work on my second novel almost full time. And I got a fellowship that brought us to Massachusetts to work on that book. So, I always remind, somebody said, an award is not an accomplishment. And it's important to remember that. I know that I won that award, not because I wrote the best book of 2002, but because 5 judges, and by the way, one of them was Jay McInerney, who I'd never met. I will always love Jay McInerney. 5 judges, argued probably very badly over 5 books that were finalists, and somehow I won. I don't even want to know how, but my book was in the right place at the right time. And it, I get bad reviews. No book will ever sell like that first book did, but boy, that was a way to play catch up, at age 46. And
that's wonderful.
That's a great story. Listen, we have a lot of writers in the audience, and one of them has asked, do any of you write your books out of order? Do you revise as you go, or only after you've finished a draft? How do you assemble your projects, if you don't mind? A little craft question for you.
So, I'll answer that quickly, because it's one that we all get asked a lot. I am a tortoise of a writer. I cannot do, I always laugh when someone says, oh, I'm on my 3rd draft, because there's no such thing for me. I go forward and back and forward and back. And when I reach the end of the novel, which maybe has only crystallized for me halfway through writing the book, it's probably the first time I write that final scene is going to be a couple of years after I started that book. I'm very, I don't want to say compulsive, but
an iron. It's like an iron. You're like smoothing out like an iron.
Yes.
Right? It's like you're smoothing it.
Get this part smooth, and then you go and do the whole thing over again. So
nobody knows how to iron anymore. So
I do. You know who else really likes ironing? Dave Eggers. Dave Eggers and I both like ironing. He told me, we intersected at a benefit once, and he said I complimented him on his shirt, and he said, well, thank you, but you know what? There was no iron in the hotel room, and that upsets me. I like to iron my shirts.
Many drafts. I write many, many drafts, and then I often change the opening and the ending. So I have to write big, messy, hundreds and 100 pages, and then I end up with very small books. So
Yeah, actually, Julia mentioned that, right? Like, oftentimes you write like 1,000 pages and you end up with like 100 good ones, right? The 100 that you want to keep. Is that sort of how you guys go about? Like, I think people have this idea that you just write it and there's the book, right? Like, yeah, rewriting is like you change a couple words or you move a scene or whatever, right? But how ugly does it get?
Yeah, I think the rewriting is the real writing. It's funny, like I'm working on this, and screenwriting is very similar, but I like to write a first draft with some energy of just try to go through and write as fast as I can, just to keep it going, to feel like a sense of accomplishment that I have some pages done, but knowing that, it's going to tear it all apart, rip it all apart many, many times, and just keep working at it. But I like having a first draft that's a little sort of more for the heart. And then because I also love the craft of rewriting. I love that part. And that's where I feel like a carpenter, like a master carpenter, sort of coming in and let me tinker this and shave, like the planes kind of coming across and whittling little pieces off and adding little things. So I really like that rewriting part, but I also know that I'm never going to be precious with that rewriting, knowing that it's like, I think I've polished it and then I send it to people and then they come back with a lot more notes. So then I've got to open it up all over again, and it's going to be all messy and dirty again. And then it's got to do the rough work and then the fine work and then the sand. It's like sandpaper, then finer and finer sandpaper, and then cloth to sort of get it. Then that's like just the typos, and then go out again, and then probably yet again you're going to get more notes, and just understand that it's like super painstaking.
Yeah. I do it over and over and over again, and then I read it aloud over and over and over again. And for me, reading aloud, I really can't lie to myself. I mean, first of all, you hear, you see typos, but you also get the voice right. Because I often think of it as if it were a play or a screenplay as I write.
Did you do that also when your kid was at home? Were you reading it out loud and being like, or did you have to like?
Maybe when he was asleep. Yeah.
Because that's a hard thing to find the time to sort of be able to do something like that. It's quite, they have little kids.
Julie,
I like the reading out loud. I want to try that. That's a good idea.
it's great.
No,
You could read too.
I'm surprised you don't. You're a playwright. You don't read your stuff out loud?
No, you can't. I mean, sometimes you can really catch yourself writing really stupid dialogue.
Right.
If you say
Right.
it, yeah.
Plays and screenplays I do, but in fiction I don't. But a lot of my fiction is interior. It's like interior. It's just very interior, or my essays. I read a lot of. I like my essay writing as well, and I don't. But I think reading that anything out loud would be helpful.
There's some publisher in Boston, I forgot her name, who, when she buys a book, she has the authors come in and read the whole book aloud to her.
The whole book.
Wow. And I read this. I read my most recent book aloud to my husband. He was very kind. It took a few days, but I think it helped. So.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Fun. Yeah,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do either of you read aloud to friends or spouses?
to my husband. Yeah.
Yeah, Patty, she did. I don't think my wife would stand for it. I can ask her, see if we have very different tastes too in things. So I'm not sure if she'd want to hear it.
I used to try that early on, actually, before we had kids. I would read out loud, and then it would be at the end of the day, and suddenly I'd realize he was being really quiet, and I'd realize he was asleep.
You're like, honey, at what point did you fall asleep?
I read a lot of comedies with that, and my wife doesn't have a great sense of humor. I mean, she's a wonderful person, but so it's like I think it's going to be funny. She's not. It's like.
No. But you can find a buddy to, just one person who sort of gets your voice and will be honest. But I think it's you who will hear it rather than the feed.
Of course.
Yeah.
No, you have to hear it.
Like as you're reading, you're like, oh.
Right. It's fun.
That's funny. You guys, we're gone over an hour. We really should probably wrap up and let everybody get back to their lives. I want everybody in the viewing audience to know that you're more than welcome to come back. We do this once a month. We do it on the second Tuesday of every month. The next salon that we're having is in January. It's our annual poetry salon. We have Rue Freeman, John Hennessy, and Artress White. reading for us. So major poets, very exciting. They're all parents because that's what we do here. We present writers who are also parents. We present a monstrous diversity of all kinds of writing, from everything from like poetry through plays. We've done music. We mostly focus on fiction though, because that's really hard. And it's all very hard. But we're just really glad that all of our viewers came, and we appreciate your comments. I'm sorry that we couldn't recite most of them, but I know that all the authors will go back and read the comments, so they'll hear all the compliments that they've gotten through the whole entire show. It feels like a show. It feels more like a show than it does like an event. But I want to really thank Patty Dann and Julia Glass and Trey Ellis for coming and sharing their lives with us, sharing their stories with us. I hope that you guys stay in touch. Join us behind closed doors if you're a Pen Apprentice member, and we would love to talk more. And so that's it. I'm going to end this broadcast, and I really, really hope that everybody has a good night and some beautiful holidays and all those things, and that everybody, whatever, has a happiness, health, safety, and all that stuff. So come back next month.